like to welcome on stage Rudi Anggono.
Thank you.
So as you guys are thinking of questions, and I'm sure you guys have a ton already, I like just kick it off. So Rudi, you've worked with a lot of brands. You've worked internationally. You've helped people break into new markets. And people are in this room because they care about their brand narrative and their brand integrity, but they also want to expand that, but they don't want to dilute the brand in any case. And how do you begin that thought process when a client comes to you and says, hey, we have a very important brand story, but we want to go international?
Well, I think, and a lot of you, I'm sure a lot of you know this already because it's not really new, is the most important thing is you have to know what you're about, right? What your brand is about, what you stand for, and find that truth, like what you believe in, and try to maintain that same behavior, I guess, throughout the market. I think the best example that I could think of is probably the response to Mac versus PC, the I am PC, because they basically embrace what is perceived as a weakness, because Mac is making fun of PC, like PCs are uncool and all that, and they took that perceived weakness and turned it into strength by embracing it. Like, yes, I am PC. That's probably the most. It translates. I mean, that's what they believe in, and they behave. Their behavior was consistent throughout the campaign, and that campaign is basically tapping into a human truth. We all have been bullied or made fun of or whatever. We all have our. You could relate to that, and that translated really well across border. You could be anywhere in the world, and you'll relate to that. Yes, I am a PC at one point in my life, and I still am probably. So it's really, yeah, I know it's not easy. It sounds easier, but I think it's just going back to what you are about.
Yeah. And could we raise the lights in the room a little bit here, guys? Just want to make sure I can put some faces here. And I know a lot of what we've been talking about is also we have strong strategies in the US. And I think our gut reaction is, well, let's try to take what we have in the US and copy and paste it in another country and see if that works, and then we can tweak from there. I know we've had a lot of discussions about this. But have you seen any clients or noticed any brands who have tried this either successfully or not?
Yeah, that Microsoft I'm PC was. I think that is the one that I could think of off the top of my head that is pretty successful. The other one, I think, to some degree, which is also doing really well, is it's not really a campaign, but more like a brand, what a brand stands for, and they're very and they're consistent with their behavior. Is Uber. I think in our discussion, Uber is like their thing is all about people helping people get to somewhere, basically, right? Get to point A to point B. But they're smart enough to identify, like, if in the US it's pretty simple because everyone has cars, so you could just that's almost like a given. Like, there's nothing. But when they try to break into like third world countries like Indonesia or India, where car ownership may not be as high, and even then the reality of how traffic is and how people get around.
It's impossible.
So, it's impossible, right? So their advantage becomes weakness, actually. And I think it might have been India or Indonesia, one of those countries where they cleverly just pivoted or they adjusted. Like, their idea, their behavior is still the same. They're all for people, helping people get somewhere. But they created a new business initiative called Uber Motorcycle or something. I think it might have been
Uber Moto.
Right. And it worked really well. It's because it reflects the reality of the market, the custom and the culture and all that. But at the same time, it still ladder up to the bigger brand positioning, I guess, of what they are and who they are.
Yeah, and I know you guys, we've heard a lot of questions from the crowd, and I know a lot of us have things that are pressing on our minds. Are there any challenges that any of you guys are facing as far as breaking into another country? And could you stand up and introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Rosalind.
Hi, Rosalind.
Canada, and I'm a plus-size retailer. And we're based in Montreal, and we have a French name. So Additionnel is the name of our banner, which we're going to try and break into the U.S. market.
So I guess if I hear correctly, you have two questions. Like first is about the name. Do you think you should keep the name, or is that your question? Or
Well, I guess that's one
uh
question.
huh.
But the thing is, we spent 35 years of like building that name in Canada, and isn't that what we're selling? Is because we're
Right.
a brick and mortar store. It's not, we're not just a virtual player. There's a landmark of 100 stores across Canada. So I think it would be very difficult at this stage to actually change our name.
Okay. Yeah. And I was gonna say, yeah, keep the name because once you translate that, it'll probably sound clunkier than what it really is. To answer your second question, I think you probably have an advantage here because there's not a huge cultural difference between the two market. In a way that there's not a lot of translation in terms of culture, right? The language is the same. The both countries pretty much consume the same pop culture, and so there's not a lot of from that aspect, there's not a lot of work that needs to be done. But to answer your question about how do you compete with a bigger player, that's like I don't think you need to behave like a Canadian brand in that sense. You can look at other case studies how American brands as well when they have to compete with other bigger players because there's really, like I said, the culturally there's really not a lot of difference. You just have to know who you're talking to and why, and look at I guess what are the palettes that you have to play the tools and the palettes that you could play with and play up to the strengths that you have. So because I'm not familiar with your brand at all, so I can't really say like how would if I guess if you're competing with a company that has the budget to run to cover the air with national with TV spots, you probably will not be if you don't have that kind of budget, then that's probably not the smartest way to go, right? Maybe you could look at other areas where their messaging is not really very strong in terms of media or in terms of framing, and then you can hit it really hard there. But again, my answer is very hypothetical because I don't know much about your brand and your objective and your business challenges and your business goals. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions at the moment?
Hi, Luke Hubbard, here from Los Angeles. I work with a product called the Tile app, and it helps you find your lost devices.
Right.
And we're international. I'm curious, as far as brand narrative, how much does, for products and services for any of us that originate in the United States, how much does that help or hurt us internationally? And are there specific markets where you think playing up Made in America is really beneficial versus those that we should avoid?
Good question.
I think you kind of answered that yourself already. Like you just have to look at it case by case, country by country and region by region. You're right. In some region, especially as a technology company from the U.S., there's a certain like what's going on in EU right now, right? Somebody's just if anything from Silicon Valley has some kind of a negative perception with the privacy issue, with data collection, and all that. Your business is different, but still, that label may or may not harm you. But in other, like I said, in other parts, it could actually be a strength. So you kind of have to do your research. You have to do like a proper planning. What is the temperature in each region, in each country, and how much do you really want to play up certain aspect of your Americanness? Because at the same time, you also want to be consistent, right? You don't want to be too like made in USA on this part of the world, and then completely. So you just have to find that common thread, I guess. If in this culture, if it's for example, like in the beauty product, like certain cultures they worship fair skin. Right? They always use models that have fair skin, straight hair, even though majority of the population in that country do not look like that. But in some other countries, that could be it could create a backlash, especially countries with stronger national identity. They don't want that kind of a. So then you have to find, this is where when you're working with the agency, you have to find like what is the creative solution to that. Maybe you don't use a model. I don't know, right? Maybe you use another device to tell your message that doesn't require you to show something that looks different in different countries.
And kind of going off of that point, Rudi, obviously a lot of what we're talking about today is about advertising and marketing,
Right.
and that totally makes sense, obviously given us in the room and the platform we have. But a lot of the challenges that we're facing may be bigger than just an advertising issue.
Right.
Have you seen any companies do a good job or maybe a poor job of trying to address an issue only with a marketing or with a media plan, where it was a larger issue?
You mean beyond the marketing, beyond the media? Yeah, I think Uber was one of them. That was really when I read about that, I was like, that was really smart. The other one, this is old, like this is really a few years ago. HP printer, I think when they tried to pivot the home printer as a business, small business, supplies basically. And they have a global ad campaign. They have a global TV spot that ran in most of the major market. And I forgot what the tagline was, but I think it was something like, basically the positioning is about we are for small business. That's basically the positioning. But then when they tried to break into certain markets, again, it might have been India again, where the reality on the ground was for people to start to even think of starting their own small business, or to do anything for that matter, they need to have a picture ID. And getting a picture ID done is not that simple in certain parts of that country, because there's no Walgreens to walk into and just get a photo taken, for example. And even then, there's it could get really expensive just to get a picture taken and printed and all that. So HP came up with a really novel and clever non-advertising solution that actually helped the brand, because it's very consistent with the brand messaging. They created a small mobile unit in a car, basically, and they equipped it with an HP camera and HP printer, and they drove around the villages, just take people's picture, print it right there, and give them the print out, and they can go to the local magistrate to apply for ID, which they can open their own business. Now, who do you think, or which printer do you think they'll buy when they're ready to do that? Obviously, HP is going to be the top of mind. That's not an ad solution. That's not. There's no media at all. But it kind of goes back to the earlier point of the brand behaves in a way that is consistent with what they tell the world they stand for. If they stand for small business, and they show this. Understanding and sensitivity and sensibility towards the local custom, that these are the challenges for people to even start a business or even think of starting a business, and they become a solution, not just, imagine they could have easily just run maybe a cut down of their 60-second TV spots in that market, but it wouldn't mean anything, right? Because it wouldn't do anything.
Yeah, and that's something just through our conversation, something that I was learning more and more of is, so many times I feel like when export or internationalization enters into the conversation is so late in the game, where we're already at the stage of, here's the marketing plan, here's the content, and now how do we adapt this content we've already created for these new markets? And to your point, even if you have a 60-second spot, even if you cut it down to 15, you lose a huge portion of the story.
Right.
And then that 15 isn't going to have the same impact in the country.
Right. It depends on. Again, it depends on the piece of creative. I remember when I was working on Nissan, we had like a really beautifully shot, like almost 2 minutes long film that aired in the G5 country, UK, France, Germany, Spain, and Italy. But the film relied on the narrative. There was a narrative in the film, so you kind of have to. You could probably cut it down to a minute and still make sense, but there's a certain narrative. But what we didn't realize back then was that when it wasn't planned to air beyond the 5 countries, but then the client decided, I want to air this in Central Europe. What we didn't realize was there was. Again, I'm not sure whether that was like a rule or maybe just the reality of the media market over there. You can only air 10 to 15 seconds max. So we have to cut down that 2 minutes film to 15 seconds. It just made no sense. It became just 15 seconds of car porn driving around, but without, you lost all the relevancy of the message, and yet you still have to spend a significant amount of money buying the media and air that thing. And at that point, our advice, if would be, well, don't air the TV. Maybe just think of something else.
Just
right?
cut it completely.
But at the same time, there's the reality of business where, well, this is my assets. I spend a lot of money on these assets already. I want to utilize this on other, and for consistency's sake. So, yeah, I don't know. In that case, I don't know what the answer is. I think in an ideal world is that you need to plan properly where and how and what market, and then you have to look at the realities of the market, and you go back to like what your brand positioning is about. Like in the case of Nissan, is innovation that excites. Then we have to look at what does that mean in the context of innovation that excites. What does that mean in Czech Republic, in whatever, you know what I mean? And then maybe we think of something that is more relevant culturally to that market.
Yeah.
Sorry, going back to your product, I guess it just made me think, like, because your thing is about tracking luggage, right? Keys or yeah, a lost thing. Then you just have to find like what are the things that people lose most in different regions. Like what is the cultural thing? I guess like what is the not joke. What is the thing that people talk about a lot when it comes to losing things? Here probably losing your key, losing your phone, but in other parts of the world maybe there's other nuances, and then you can play that up. But your thing is still about, but your bigger message is still about, we help you track your lost item, whatever that may be.
That's good insight. Good insight. Does anyone have any other examples of brands that they've seen do this well, and we can kind of break down and dissect and learn from those? I mean, you guys work in this day in and day out. So I know you guys probably have a lot of other ideas that we aren't even noticing.
Can I ask a follow-up question on that? On what you said?
Yeah, go for it.
I'm just curious, if you have any recommendations for what people can do if they want to find those nuances, but they may not have the resources to go there. I wanted to repeat, I just want to find out, for finding out nuance of a culture, if you don't have the resources to travel, or maybe you don't know anybody locally from that spot, it's kind of hard to find out what do they talk about in the day-to-day. So I was just curious if you found any creative solutions for that in particular, because that's something that we're struggling with right now.
Yeah, good question. I think, well, the good thing we live in a digital age, right? Where basically everything you can find on, there's this thing called Google search.
Yeah.
No, but I'm sorry, I didn't. But I mean, it's. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can ask me later, I'll send you the URL.
You could start. I mean, seriously. I mean, a lot of people, they start from that. They just kind of. But to be. I understand what you're trying to say. I guess it depends on your business needs. If you identify that market as a very important market, then maybe you want to go in there and invest on proper planning and proper research. You can start with just the not superficial, but like the initial study. But then, if you really want to know the bolts and nuts, you kind of have to be in there.
Yeah, and this morning, I mean, a few things that kind of come to mind would be the Google consumer surveys, so where you can actually ask for those insights globally instantaneously, which is, I mean, to your point, right. We live in a digital age, and this is a beautiful tool that we have access to. Because that is something that, I mean, clients bring that up all the time. It's like, yeah, if I could ask all of my consumers these questions, I'd have all the answers. And we don't have all the answers, and I'm not saying we do. But hopefully we can help you get closer.
Right, yeah, to your point, like in the Google consumer survey, the Google trend, they give you a pretty good like macro trend, but to really, like, your question is about the nuances, then I think you have to do you have to do a local planning. Exactly, you have to spend some time. But again, you have to decide whether it's worth your investment. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We got a mic coming your way here.
It was just a comment. Coming from the agency side, there are also like proprietary tools that agencies have that can,
True.
have more psychographic habits, and you can tailor different categories of segments through that. So if you need an agency, let us know.
Thank you. No, thank you for adding that.
100%. No, and that is, I mean, I've worked with a lot of clients who have seen a lot of success in partnering with local partners who are on the ground or at least in the region, because they can have that team that brings those insights to the table and says, hey, yeah, we don't even have to run all of your business or run all of your media, but we can bring these insights to you, and that's going to be invaluable, which is absolutely huge, because we can't all just have a Rudi to like carry around with us. I wish we could.
Yeah, I only know so much too.
Yeah. One of the other things that I thought was interesting just speaking to you is when you're, and you kind of brought this up earlier, is when you're having these brainstorming sessions with clients and whiteboarding, a lot of the value also is getting all the right people in the room.
Mm-hmm.
So I work with a lot of clients, and I have conversations with different departments from the client. And in my mind, I was like, oh, it'd be a perfect world if everyone just got together and actually learned from each other. Do you have any interesting stories of working with clients where just the fact that they were meeting each other for the first time within the same company?
What do you mean, like from different department?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think recently, actually. I'm not sure if I can name names. That's the only problem. It's we were working with a let's say very large retailer, and so just a little bit of background. Like the zoo, like John said, we had like the in-house creative think tank or creative agency or creative. Well, agency is not the right word because we're not really an agency, more like a creative team, and our mission is to help our partners, brands, and agencies to how to solve their business challenges and innovate from within using our tools and platforms and technologies and all that. Right? And in this particular thing is we were, and usually, not always, but let's say like half of the time we're dealing with the marketing and the comms and or departments from the clients, but we also work sometimes. We work directly with the R&D, with the product team, and that's with the non-advertising part of the job basically. And this was one of them where we are working with the product people from this client, and we actually became the conduit, so to speak. So because between the R&D and their marketing, they don't talk to each other, and there's no channel. I guess the product team. Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know why. It just is. So that was actually the first time when we finally set up that meeting. That was the first time they met each other, which is really interesting. And you could see and there's a lot of learning from for us, for me personally as well. You could kind of see why. I read somewhere that 85% of product launches fail, for example, like in the last 2 years or so, and you kind of could see why from there, because. These two groups, because they don't talk to each other. Like the product people, they are developing the product just purely from product standpoint, without thinking of the users, who would use it, how would they use it, and why would they use it, right? And then when you get to the other side, they don't think about the narrative. How do you craft a narrative around this new product? Would it make sense? But to their credit, it's hard to craft that if you didn't figure out the why you make that thing in the first place first. So this is sometimes where the zoo could come in and kind of help them, advise or consult, because we have a lot of data, because we have the insights. We could tell people the trend is going that way, yet you're making product that's actually going that way. So there's a tension here that kind of doesn't make sense. You want to hit this sweet spot in the middle. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's probably the only the one that I could think of right now.
Yeah, no, and that's huge. Yeah. And I mean, even like internally within Google, I see this all the time.
Right.
We're just getting our teams in the same room. We're like, oh my gosh, we could totally help each other out.
Right.
And because even though we may be pulling from the same data source, we're not having the same kind of conversations, which is huge. Are there any specific regions that are causes for difficulty when transitioning your brands? Let's say, is anyone having difficulty in EMEA? EMEA is totally covered. APAC? Africa? And you brought it up, didn't you?
There's a lot of issues there for us in general. It's just it's such a different market where most people use their phones for internet. They don't have internet at home. When you're trying to sell an e-commerce subscription product, it's a little bit challenging. That and they don't really use credit cards that often either. So.
Right.
But as it relates to brands, we have the unique
actually acquired a different company 6 or 7 years ago that became part of the credit bureau, and that name had some good equity that for some reason the powers that be at the time decided just to disband and let go of it. So people still refer to us as the former name, and it's just something that we still are going after every day. So overall credit awareness is just low in a lot of other countries. I mean, like we talked about earlier, people aren't very familiar with what their credit score is or credit report is in many different countries and what it can help you with. So, but yeah, Africa just seems to be a rare one for us. But acquisitions is a tough one. We're actually going to be facing that in Colombia soon too.
What's your what is the company?
TransUnion, the credit bureau. TransUnion.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
And are you finding anything to be successful in maintaining the brand image or the brand name?
We were lucky enough last January, we went through a brand refresh, and it's a much more friendlier brand, and it's one that the entire company globally has embraced. So if anything, it's been more of an internal plus for us to keep that brand name, make us all feel very much more connected across the world. But as far as externally, it's not so much even consumers that are still referring to us as the former name. Our financial institution partners, the banks and so forth, they still refer to us as the former name. So when a consumer comes in and there's an issue, they say, "Oh, you need to go," to that company. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's tough.
Hi, I'm Ami. I work at Performix, an agency, and my client is a large social media client, real-time client. One of the things that we're challenged with is creatives, and we are global. So how do you keep up in a global market with relevant creative when what's relevant is changing by the minute?
Right. Going back to the, you start with a really good planning, obviously, but it's also finding that truth. That what does your brand stand for? What's your brand belief? And then find that human truth about whatever the message you want to get out there. Because then, if you have that, it's easier. Like that MPC thing, right? They figure out the human truth here. It's like we are an underdog at some point or at some aspect of our life, and they celebrate that. And that doesn't require any translation. The creative could change. The expression of that piece of creative could be in any form, but the essence is the same, right? They're celebrating that feeling of, when you're being poked fun at as the not cool one. That's okay. That's who you are. In terms of like the execution, that again, that will require knowledge on what is acceptable and not acceptable with each culture.
We have time probably for one other quick question or comment.
Hi, I guess I'm just curious, when you're first getting into a new project, you're talking about really good planning and all that good stuff. Just curious, what are the first few things that you try to evaluate, think about, try to iron out before moving along? When it's that, do we need this? Are we coming up with something good? What kind of design do we need? How can we make this scalable, essentially? How do you start trying to answer that question, the scalability for cultures worldwide?
Right. I think before we get to the find the truth again. Going back to that, find the human truth. Find your brand. Find the story of your brand first. Like, what is your brand? What is your brand story? What do you really believe in? What do you stand for? And then find that insight. What is it that everyone can relate to? And then you can typically the scale will just kind of fall into place once you figure that out. You kind of know you get a good instinct. Like, okay, this could be executed. This could be scaled up easily. But the watch out is, and it's gonna sound like a heresy coming because I work for Google. It's like I notice it's a lot of and I don't know whether this is what you're implying in your question, is a lot of brands or even agency, ourselves sometimes as well, is we made the mistake of we start with a container, like a YouTube or whatever, and then we try to, because assuming that YouTube is everywhere in the world and watched by billions and billions of people, therefore by being there we're scaled up. The reality is how how that's being consumed in different countries is very different. And then there's a practical reality of the connection, the speed, and the availability of data. Right? Recently we had a case with a beauty product where it was developed in Japan, and they use a lot of cool, they use Japanese creators, Japanese YouTube creator, and then they try to export that to APAC. It failed in a lot of the countries where Wi-Fi is not easily available, and when people do not do they don't just watch video on their phone in the middle of the day because the data costs a lot of money. Right? They probably wait until they're home or their office when there's Wi-Fi, and then maybe. So the behavior, the behavior is driven mostly by practical reason of connection and cost and all that. Now, if you're banking your idea on the media first, right, put it on YouTube first, then that campaign will fail.